Houston Astros, Seattle Mariners, 18 inning game.
18, oh my.
18 innings.
Are you the
what is starting? Lloyd's so what's over?
Well, he reads it all.
That's right.
We don't have to worry. Sometimes you get listening even if you're not here. That's one of the times you do it without being thankful. It's by default. You're thankful by default. It's sincere nevertheless.
All the things that I'm really at too. Cecil's a jerk.
You got to visit a little bit? You know, the community hall. Oh, yeah. We attended yesterday, they had a program. Now I've got a friend in Richmond for
Even more than
dinner. I came back, you put it in. So hopefully there's still. I'll see you next time.
I can call it.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, just as I guess they are. Hopefully they'll resell that.
the newsman tells us all this.
Have you seen the parking lot of the factory up here?
Yes, what is the big pile of junk?
Well, they must be cleaning up the building sold.
Oh, so there's
Another company coming in.
Oh, okay, and they're taking
Yeah, I saw it.
A few years ago, they just put it up like
That's the new people are doing that?
It's a steel company, all I know. Yeah. Don't know what it means or anything.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out.
Yeah.
Ding. Good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome to First Universalist Church of New Madison on this fine fall day. The fall colors are out. We need rain really bad, but the farmers are going to full speed to get the harvest out. So watch on the roads. The machines are getting so big it's almost unbelievable now. Do we have any announcements?
Just to announce that next week's presentation will be given by Virginia McNeil. I'll get the McNeil right.
From
we want to
McNeil.
welcome her. She's coming in, I think, from West Virginia. However, she has roots in, at one time attended this church. Again, Virginia McNeil. And she'll be giving us some tips and presentations and information on safeguarding our environment here in Ohio, and also how she does and others in her fact network actually safeguard our environment, and maybe some tips for us as well. So it should be a very interesting presentation by Virginia.
Good.
She has some PowerPoint slides she'll be sharing, plus a presentation, and we'll have our normal worship service right along with that.
Okay, so Derek is with us today. Always happy to have him, and hence the slides. His is on Buddhist derivation about words, language. So we'll do some exploration there. Virginia will be with us next week, and Roberta, I think, is going to be with us the week after and maybe the week after that. She has some presentations that may run over into 2 weeks. So we've got a really interesting time lined up in the future here. I have to say it's nice to see faces we haven't seen for a while. Everybody is always welcome, but it's nice to see people we haven't seen for quite a while. So if it takes Derek to get you here, we'll get Derek back again.
I'll be back November 13th.
November 13th, you can put that on your calendar. And actually, Derek's husband, we're trying to get him to come. He spoke on immigrants from Afghanistan. Was that?
You're thinking Dr. Bohannon from Muncie.
Oh, okay, not him.
So my husband, he spent part of the summer serving with the Episcopal Church's Borderland Ministries, and he's talking at El Dorado about some of his observations from
So
that.
anyway, and actually we might be able to get Dr. Bohannon as well. We're going to try. We're looking. Anybody has suggestions for outside speakers? Please let us know. This congregation is famous for wanting to have new ideas and new people, and wanting to talk to those people. So if they just want to get up here and spout and then leave, they're not going to be very happy, because they're going to get questions and discussion. Yes.
And can I also announce, or at least mention, we had shared in the past about our church's efforts and outreach efforts to Ukraine. And we actually had that project off the ground, and we mentioned part of it last week. Lou's been working very hard on it. We are doing two things. Obviously, we'll be sending some cash over there, probably with special collections here at church. But also, we are sending coats over there via a Ukrainian-based church in Galloway, Ohio. They send things, they collect things on an ongoing basis. They use large shipping containers, and one of those shipping containers will contain as many coats as we are buying, clean, nice used coats, either from Goodwill or accepting clean, wearable, gently worn, if you will, coats, winter coats for the people of Ukraine. And Lou has been working very hard on it, and he'll have a report for us one of these days, kind of give us a status report of where we're going with it.
Yes, we did have an email from Lou. He has made some purchases.
Yes, he has.
And he's contacted Goodwills like all over this whole region, basically looking for deals. Trying to spend money that we're going to put out wisely. So we're going to contribute money. Part of it will go for cash assistance, and part of it will go for the coats, the hats, and the gloves that they are going to need. All right, anything else? All right, our prelude. This is my Father's world. This is my Father's world, and to my listening ears all nature sings, and round me rings. The music of the spheres, this is my Father's world. I rest me in the thought of rocks and trees, of skies and seas. His hand the wonders wrought. Thank Roberta for bringing something from the Presbyterian hymnal, not in our hymnal. All right, Lou's here. Do you want to give us a quick report? We talked about a little bit about Ukraine. We mentioned that you had already made some purchases and that we're shipping things to the church in Columbus.
Yes.
And then it's going from there to Ukraine.
Yes. We just started doing shopping at Goodwill stores, and thankfully Denise is the one who's been making sure that the coats are well made and clean and so on and so forth. And she organized them. We'll bring them in. We're going to put them on the table downstairs after service. So that's a start. And you know, the total price for, was it 10 coats and a dozen gloves and caps and a dozen caps probably came to a total at $130, which is far below, you know, we're aiming for $500 maybe to spend.
Okay.
So we can ship a lot of clothing over there. I've been in contact with Valentine, I can't pronounce his last name, I'm sorry, and also he gave me the name, and I talked to the guy by the name of Victor, another one, he's got the last name that I can't really pronounce, but this guy, this gentleman Victor, I talked to him, and it cost to ship one crate between $8,000 and $10,000. And when I saw that, I thought, well, geez, you know, where I used to work, they give to United Way and they give to other charities. So I contacted, actually the guy that's on paper as belonging here, Mark Scancarella. His wife spoke here, a couple of years ago, and he was my former boss, and he's still there. So he gave me the name of a woman by the name of Laura Reed. I have sent her the information that they request. I might ask you to maybe help me resend it and doctor it up, because it took me a while to see how he answered things, and it doesn't work as well as it maybe should. So, but anyhow, I think it's moving, so we're pretty happy how things are moving along.
Okay, we're in process. We haven't decided the exact amount of money, but Lou's given us a range that we're going to work with. We're going to take up a special offering. El Dorado is going to join us in this. We've talked to the community, and as you know, Darke County is kind of conservative, and they like to keep their money close to home, and they're very generous with it, but it's very generous to local people and not people from far away whose names they can't pronounce. So I think we're going to be kind of on our own, but we are always open for anybody else that wants to contribute. All right, our chalice lighting is number 434 in your hymnal. May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and in miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. All right, our affirmation is all that we share is sacred by Andre Moi. As we gather together, may we remember, when you share with me what is most important to you, that is where listening begins. When I show you that I hear you, when I say your life matters, that is where compassion begins. When I open the door to greet you, that is where hospitality begins. When I venture out to bring you to shelter, that is where love begins. When I risk my comfort to ease your suffering, when I act against hatred, violence, and injustice, that is where courage begins. Because of our shared humanity, because of our differences, that is where holy gratitude begins. May this space be a table that is not complete until all are welcome. May this table be a space of beauty where together we create a series of miracles and where all that we share is sacred. May it be so.
Opening hymn.
Oh, first hymn, yes. First hymn is 88, Calm Soul of All Things. Thank you. we'll just do the moment of silence and then we'll go to the story, and I think you'll see what I mean. This story is not really for children, but it involves children and is about children. This was on CBS News, I think Friday. You might have seen it. This is, I would hate to say, probably typical of what happens in Florida, and I am afraid it may become typical of what will happen in Ohio.
These two men are accused of firing guns during a road rage incident, and bullets hit 2 children inside their vehicles. This road rage incident lasted several miles and spanned 2 counties.
It's on US 1, starting in Duval County, ending in Nassau. Both men are now charged with attempted murder. News Jackson is joining us live from Nassau County, where this all ended. Janice?
Yeah, and it ended right here in this area with those 2 vehicles pulled over. A 5-year-old girl was shot. She's expected to be okay. And a 14-year-old girl was also shot. She is still in the hospital with a collapsed lung. This is US 1, and it's the same road where a shootout sent 2 children to the hospital.
911, where's your emergency?
According to Nassau County Sheriff's Office, 43-year-old Frank Allison of Callahan and 35-year-old William Hill of Georgia were in a road rage battle on US 1 that got so bad a man called 911.
You got a guy in a small SUV off the road. I mean, driving reckless, slamming on brakes in front of him, both hauling butt.
The situation escalates more. Deputies say Hill in a black pickup truck pulled up to Allison in a gray car to get Allison to pull over. A 911 caller observed.
He's literally trying to run him off the road. I mean, he's driving reckless, man. He's literally trying to run him off that road.
A passenger in Allison's car flips a middle finger to Hill's truck. Then a water bottle is thrown from Hill's truck. Investigators say Allison shot his .45 caliber gun once at the black truck and sped off. A 5-year-old in the truck was shot, and investigators say Hill retaliated. They say Hill shot his Glock 43 7 to 8 times at Allison. A bullet hits a 14-year-old girl in the car. Both men have children injured in their vehicles, but Sheriff Bill Leeper explains that did not stop the violence from escalating again.
Both of them stopped, and the 2 drivers got out and started arguing and fighting with each other. The deputy had to break up the fight.
Now both men are facing an attempted murder charge each, as the children attempt to recover from a violent day of road rage. Both men have bonded out, but there could be more charges added. And coming up tonight at 6, you're going to hear another 911 call from one of the mothers after her child had been shot. The plea she made with the dispatcher. And also coming up tonight, things that you can do to de-escalate a situation like this when road rage has the potential to happen. Reporting live in Nassau County, Janice Harris, Channel 4, the local station.
Think about this, folks. They get mad at each other. They each have guns. They're no more in control of their emotions than a child with a gun. The first guy shoots a wild shot into the back of the other vehicle, hits a child, and she was shot in the leg. A 4-year-old girl was shot in the leg and wounded. The driver of the vehicle did not know where she was shot. All he knew was there was blood all over the back seat, and the kids were crying, and his wife was yelling. So what does he do? Does he stop? Does he call for an ambulance? Does he stop to see how his child is? He pulls out his gun and shoots 8 times into the other vehicle. And then they see a sheriff's deputy parked along the road doing speed checks, so they both pull into the sheriff's deputy to blame the other guy, and they get out, and what do? Do they check their children in the back seat bleeding? No, they start fist fighting between the 2 of them, and a deputy has to break up a fist fight. What is going on in this world, and is this what we're going to see in Ohio, with everybody allowed to have a gun now, with no background checks, no education on how to use a gun? I despair at the future, and it's scary to be on the highway. So, all right, That is not really a children's story, but it is a story that involves children and a story that is pretty difficult for children. All right, joys and concerns. Those two kids in Florida, the girl with the punctured lung, she is recovering. She's still in the hospital. Luckily, it did not hit any vital organs. It was a through and through shot, but a punctured lung is nothing to joke about. When you get a punctured lung, they put in a chest tube, which means they put an incision under your ribs and stick a plastic tube about 3/4 of an inch in diameter and tape it in there. Because your lungs actually don't expand on their own. If you understand how the body works, when your chest muscles expand, it pulls the vacuum in your chest cavity, helps your lung expand. There's no real muscles in your lung. So if there's a hole between your chest cavity and the outside area, there's no vacuum. Your lung shrivels up to the size of a collapsed balloon and you can't breathe. That's a scary feeling. And it's a painful situation to have that chest tube in there for 2 or 3 days while that incision heals. So, joys and concerns, we want to keep the Ukraine. We have our sunflowers, the national flower of Ukraine, and we will stay with Ukraine as long as needed, sending what aid we can and sending what, with our hearts and minds, what is important to them as well. Anything else? Yes?
Traveling mercies for me this week. I'll be driving up to Michigan. I'm going to be visiting my best friend from high school. He's been in treatment for stage 3 colon cancer.
Oh my.
Keep him in your thoughts as well. His name's James.
Beautiful time to be traveling in Michigan. As you know, we just got back last week. Had a great time at the bridge and the island, Mackinac, or as I like to say, Mackinac. I don't care what the pronunciation is. Mackinac is fun. Yes. Michiganders look down their nose at that. Anything else? Yes.
2 joys. One is this fall color is amazing. I wish I was a maple tree. I'd be beautiful. This last couple of weeks, man, killer.
Yes.
The second is that the bands I play in have been back up and running now for a few weeks, and we're rehearsing for our first concert. We're under a new director, so it's an adjustment for long-timers like me, and there's quite a few of us, so we're really looking forward to a successful concert. And that's going to be November 13th. It's a Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock.
Will that be in Sinclair again?
Yeah, it's free. It doesn't cost anything, not even the park. So I hope you'll come and see the new era starting with our new conductor. But it's a real joy to see all these people, and I'm meeting a lot of young new musicians. The group's about half and half of old-timers and new young people, and they're so talented and enthusiastic about it, and I'm real excited to meet them and share with them.
Good. That's good to hear. Always great to have music back in our lives again. And that brings us to the virus. The virus is still there. It is still spreading. There are people still, about 400 to 500 people a day, still dying of the virus. So it has not gone away. You need to get your booster if you haven't done it. I think only 5 or 10% have got their last booster, which is really important. And you need to get your flu shot. Flu, the last couple of years, because everybody wore masks and washed their hands, the flu infection rate was minuscule. But everybody's gone back to life as normal now, and the flu infection is going to be, I'm afraid, is going to be really high this year. So we want to make sure that we're protected from both of those, and that's up to you to protect yourself. I guess a joy or a concern. My wife's birthday was yesterday. We went down to Houston Woods to look at the leaves and just to walk around. That's a beautiful state park. And then we went to Oxford, which if you've ever been to Oxford, Miami University, a college town, is always fun to walk through. Stopped at a Thai restaurant for dinner, which is the first time I've ever had Thai food. It was pretty impressive and pretty reasonably priced too. I was surprised. And enjoyed that. But while we were driving through the park, we passed a pickup truck with 6 guys 2 kids and a dog. Even the dog was wearing blaze orange, and each of the guys was wearing blaze orange, and we're looking at each other saying, I know hunting season started, but this is a state park. And they all had guns, they all had rifles. So we went back to the ranger station, which there was nobody there, but there was a big bulletin board outside, and on the bulletin board is a map that says, a red area is no hunting allowed, green area is hunting per the regulations of the state. And I thought, well, this is obvious. You can hunt in the places in the park which are back off the beaten path and there's nobody there. Then I started looking at the map a little closer. There's bridle paths. You can rent horses and ride horses at Houston Woods, which if you own your own horse, it's a fantastic experience. But there are bridle paths through the hunting areas. There are footpaths through the hunting areas. So all the hunters are wearing blaze orange so they don't shoot each other, but the nature people, the people who are just traveling along there, are wearing just regular clothes. Am I missing something here? Is this what the state of Ohio has planned and there hasn't been an accident yet? And there wasn't anybody we could ask, so that's on my list of things. If I run across a conservation agent, like, what's up with this? Do you really think it's safe to have novice new hunters on the first day of deer season with buck fever shooting at anything that moves with horses walking down the path? It's just unusual. So, all right, we need to light a few candles here for Ukraine, for not only those kids in Florida, but kids all over that are riding in cars with adults who have guns and don't know how to use them or shouldn't be using them. And for those thoughts, those fears, those desires that you hold deep and are unable to voice to others, know that we are with you in spirit. And if you need anything in the physical world, please let us know. We are available. All right. This is a picture of Houston Woods. If you haven't seen Houston Woods, beautiful facility. It's fairly reasonable if you want to rent a room there for the night. They also have cottages and cabins, and they have pet-friendly cabins. You can actually rent a cabin and take your dog down with you. And the beach has an area where you can take your Labrador swimming off the beach legally. So, all right, Derek is with us talking about a dangerous word.
Thank you again for having me back for the church service, and thank you to the El Dorado congregation for releasing me to come up here about once a month. I do appreciate them for that. And also, normally I would stay and chat for a while after the church service here, but with my husband preaching at El Dorado, I promised him that I would get back promptly, probably close to the end of their service. So won't be able to linger for very long today. The reading I bring today comes from the Buddhist scripture known as the Dhammapada. It reads, "First, some say that all human experience is based on destiny. Second, some hold that everything is decreed by God and controlled by his will. Third, some say that everything happens by chance without having any cause or condition. But if everything has been decided by destiny, both good deeds and bad deeds are predetermined. Joy and sorrow are predestined. Nothing would exist that is not foreordained. Then all human effort and plans for improvement and progress would be vain, and humanity would be without hope. The same is true of the other viewpoints, for if everything is in the hands of a god or blind chance, what hope has humankind? It is no wonder, then, that people holding these concepts lose hope, neglect efforts to act wisely, and neglect avoiding evil." So, the Gospel of John begins by reading, "In the beginning was the Word." Before everything else, before there were cities and nations, before there were churches or temples, before perhaps there was even organized religion, there were words. Scientists wrestle with communications of different species, the songs of whales, the gestures of squid, the chemical signals from ants. But we are the only creatures we know about that form these things called words, combinations of sounds that convey a set of defined meanings from one person to another. Imagine if we saw a hat for the very first time, but didn't know what it was, did not have a word for it. And it might creep you out if you saw somebody take the hat off their head. Was that a covering? Or did they take off part of their head? If you don't have a word for hat, what is that thing? We need words to explain and for order, for the assembling of knowledge. And if we had no way of communicating or categorizing the world around us, we might descend into mental confusion, anarchy. Words are absolutely needed for human life. Words matter. What they mean matters. How we use words matters. Today's reading comes to us from the scriptures of the Buddhist faith. The Buddhist concept of scripture is very complicated compared to Jewish, Christian, and Muslim concepts of scripture. The readings that have authority are not uniform across the different branches of Buddhism. So different branches of Buddhism will assign very different authority to different groups of text. Also, the quantity of writings held up as scripture is so much more than a single book. Instead, it's thousands of scrolls and books. A Buddhist monk might have expertise in a few of these texts, but very few monks are going to be well read on lots of them. The Dhammapada, though, is one that is widely shared across many Buddhist traditions. And in any case, what I want you to keep in mind is that in today's reading, a collection of recounted sayings from the Buddha is wrestling with concepts carried by a word. And there's something potentially dangerous here if we don't use this word wisely. The word for today is everything. Everything. The Buddha is wrestling with how people talk about human life. Everything is destiny, some say. Everything is the will of God, others say. Everything is random, others say. And he finds that each of these options is horribly flawed. If everything is destiny, then everything we do is already predetermined. Our choices are meaningless because we didn't really make those choices. We only think we did, because destiny predetermined the choices we were going to make. If everything is the will of God, then we are, as the theologian and scientist Emanuel Swedenborg once wrote, mere doors or automatons that only move when pushed. An automaton is the 1700s word that comes close to the idea of a robot, a machine that just kind of runs automatically when a human being puts the right input in and then it just kind of goes automatically. And if everything is random, ooh, well, then we're in the middle of meaningless chaos. And all of our actions have no meaning because everything is random. Here the Buddha is concerned with the importance of human agency, that our actions do have causes and effect, and sometimes our choices matter a great deal in creating causes and effect. I would go a little further, though, and expand upon his writings to say some additional things. Sometimes the events of life can be termed destiny. Sometimes. Or at least the result of causes we have no control over. For example, none of us in this room, as far as I know, made any of the choices that caused or could have stopped the Great Recession that began in 2008. But all of us had to live with the consequences. I also think that some things are the will of God, at least in the Quaker sense of some things being a divine leading or inspiration. My experience in life is that my call to be a minister was a divine leading. Some things do appear pretty random. My brother ruptured a tendon this past year for reasons that nobody figured out. He hadn't been involved in a physical altercation in his police work, said he hadn't had one in 2 years. He hadn't done any difficult work on his house, nothing strenuous. He hadn't had a fall or any other kind of accident. He woke up one day, his arm hurt, and there was a huge bruise. And when he went to the doctor, they said, "Mr. Parker, you ruptured your tendon." They never figured out how. Does feel pretty random. So some things could be termed destiny, some things could be termed God, some things could be determined to be random, but not everything. Not everything. Some things very much depend upon our understanding and the actions we choose to take. Not everything is caused by one thing. That word for the day, everything. This morning, though, I want to dig just a little bit deeper with this word, because even though the word everything is a word that's fraught with risk, it's not automatically a bad word, but there are dangers, hazards. This bag, everything I packed in this bag, I packed from home. Everything that I packed in this bag, I packed from home. A innocent, undeceptive, accurate, harmless use of the word everything. But there are other uses of the word everything that present us with dangers. Everything conservative is cruelty. Not true. Everything liberal is immoral. Not true. Everything she does is right. Not true. Everything he does is wrong. Not true. Everything Chinese is bad. Not true. Everything American is good. Not true. The danger here was hinted at by the Buddha in these writings. And here I'm going to make it more explicit. There are dangerous uses of the word everything when the word is used to pave over differences and subtle distinctions, and we pretend that the complexities of life do not exist. The word everything is dangerous. When the word everything is used to absolutize one position as infallibly right or as completely, totally, 100% wrong, it is dangerous. It is dangerous because it is easy for the word everything to become dishonest speech, which is one of the things that Buddhism is deeply concerned about. Right thought, right action, right speech. And so I'm going to conclude with a Buddhist prayer for right speech, and a goal I hope that each human being can hold on to, far beyond the hazards of the word everything. Let the words that we use be transparent and honest, so that we can be an appropriate reflection of truth. I pray against thoughts of lying. I pray against malicious talk. I pray against negative use of words, because speech was not given for us to abuse. Instead, let us build up things with words that are honest, that come from what is true. So one of my favorite things when I get to worship with you, as well as the El Dorado Church, is we have time for dialogue, which you will not see in lots of other churches, a few others, but not lots of them. And I often find that in that dialogue, you all share really good wisdom with one another, and I walk away from here knowing wisdom that is new to me, a new insight, something that did not occur to me. Even if it's just a really good question that I don't have an answer for. What words are stirring in your hearts and minds?
I think of Buddhists as being non-violent, but then you've got Myanmar, where they're after the Rohingyas, and I can't explain that in my mind.
It's good to understand that every religious tradition is vulnerable to fundamentalism. Every religious tradition is vulnerable to fundamentalism. And you think, in the West, we think of Buddhism as a very peaceful religion. But there is this phenomenon in Myanmar where you have violent, genocidal persecution of Rohingya Muslims by the Buddhist majority. There's also a history in Sri Lanka of violence engaged in by Buddhists. And this gets us into like the fundamentalist mindset. The Buddhists who encourage this kind of violence, what they will say and write in their own writings is, like for example with the Rohingya, we need to protect people from the dangers of that Muslim religion, because it will lead people away from enlightenment. So I am going to encourage an act of violence. I'm going to sacrifice my enlightenment so that all these other people can be safe from the heresy of Islam. And maybe in a future life, I will make up for that awful thing I have done. But the fundamentalist mind tries to find a way to kind of poach concepts and remix them in ways to encourage a violent outcome or a discriminatory outcome. And it's amazing. You can track it across multiple religious traditions. There was a scholar at the University of Chicago named Martin Marty who was head of a research project called the Fundamentalism Project. And he's been able to map out this phenomenon. Anytime there is change, a lot of societal change, people get kind of worried and scared, and fundamentalism looks attractive. And then we need someone to blame, an other that we can act against. And so it is. It's a scary phenomenon, and it absolutely violates core tenets of their own faith.
Thank you.
Yes.
I would also suggest, to me, that reminds me of what we're dealing with in the United States, and that is Christian nationalism. And that's the connection. Whenever you get, religion connected to politics or the government, they're never, ever everything. They really, they don't mix well. And there's a reason, I think, as Unitarian Universalists, we really have to join with other liberal religions in the United States to keep that separation. There's just very little space for religion to be involved in politics.
Because there's eventually a temptation for power, that accumulation of power, the exercise of government's coercive power on behalf of maybe my tradition, but certainly not yours. And I think you are. A lot of these things begin at home. Right and honest speech begins at home, but also being wary and pointing out the places where people are making Christian nationalist claims that the Christian tradition actually does not support. I think one of the most horrifying is if you saw some of the banners that were flying outside the Capitol during the January 6 attacks, you saw this very weird image of like a muscular, like Jesus with a fist, like a pro-violence Jesus, which is nowhere in the biblical text. I mean, yes, there are some places where he gets angry, but it's not, read and do likewise. And I think that is what you're talking about is a huge problem for the community fabric of our country, because there's a threat for those who are not Christian, those of non-Christian faiths, in a nation where some of our neighbors are embracing Christian nationalism. But eventually that also spills over into places that other neighbors of ours ought to be concerned. Because eventually the Christian nationalists want to figure out, so who's the real Christian? Does that include Mormons? What about Catholics? Christian Science practitioners, Jehovah's Witnesses? What about those icky Episcopalians? And their liberal ways. Maybe they're not real Christians either, not good Americans either. And yeah, that is a struggle we have here, and one that we do need to bear witness about.
Getting back to your word, everything.
Everything.
That's so polarizing. And I'm seeing that as a rising trend in just not only politics, but just in social interaction. We're getting more and more polarized and forgetting that there's a middle ground there. There's a middle class, there's a middle ground, and
as well as nuance. Like whatever happened to nuance? It's like everything is totally black or white, and there is supposedly never any shade of gray.
Exactly, and it reminded me of a guy I worked with at Boonshoft who I've taken away so much good from that man. He was a housekeeper like me. And if I started to drama queen something, following the masses, but I drama queen something, and he had the best way of always being able to see multiple sides to everything. And maybe he wasn't the best at verbalizing it, but he could always get a situation calmed down and get me to think, oh yeah, they're not looking at this from a facilities department perspective. They're looking at this from an education department perspective. And I wish I could make a saint out of him. I don't want to give his name because of this damn online thing, but look for people like that and try to absorb that.
You've certainly given me an idea for a future sermon here or somewhere else around, the practice of polarizing language. Because I think we can all think of people in the wider culture who deploy that polarizing language for very self-interested purposes. Because, when you polarize something, you get a certain level of control if it wasn't previously that way. But thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.
I am a little mindful of time this morning in a way I normally am not.
Are we done?
As they would say at Quaker meeting, are all hearts and minds free?
All right.
I guess they are. Thank you. And as I said, I will be back November 13th.
We always like to have Derek here, and we're looking forward to having his husband here if we can talk him into it. So,
Thank you.
Any comments that we want to do? Oops, I left the paper down there. Time for our offering. As is usual, feel free to put something in. If you need something, take something out. I'm always curious to see if anybody ever slips an envelope under the door. It hasn't happened yet, but it may. But the doors we're working on, Chaz and I are working on the doors. They will be tighter fitting, so it'll be harder to slip something in. So in the future. And we're going to hear "Poor Wandering One" from Gilbert and Sullivan. All right, our closing hymn is 186.
A little footnote about this hymn, it only shows up in the UU hymnal. It is the words of Confucius set to a tune from Kentucky Harmony.
We may have to read some of that at the end. Grieve not your heart, words of Confucius. That should be interesting.
Set to Kentucky Harmony.
Be fair to people when they err, when good your pleasure show. Their faults be quick to understand, in judging them be slow. Right. Extinguishing the chalice is 699. Whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honorable, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. Philippians 4. All right, there are donuts. I forgot to plug the coffee in, so we'll plug the hot water in and the coffee. And I want you to have a good week and be safe. That ends our service. And our postlude, This Love of Mine, Tommy Dorsey. ends our service. Please stay resilient like the roses that Roberta is still bringing in, still blooming in October. Believe it or not.
Good sermon today. I'm really glad to hear your good back up for record. The discourse started out about 14 people. And I just buzzed over there. Bill, I had stuff.
They created those long shapes in some, but
I would just raise myself. It was so.
well, eating already.
Well, I got old. I'm completely over it now. 95%. And my wife says it's okay to be around people who are better. I can't get the explanation. I'm really being careful about singing because it's still in my voice a little bit. And
I thought I heard you come in.
yeah.
Well, that can't really special well for
I chorus practice I just sort of hum along with them. Our director picks a really tough response. And up here, I did music, I'm doing the sight reading. And sight reading, so I've been basically practicing sight reading. The songs that we rehearse. But I also it's still in my voice a little bit. So I've been real careful. I just sort of hung along with him, and I didn't sing it all day. But I love to sing.